we ready to rock and roll?
I need my spectacles.
Do I need to wait for you, or are you gonna be?
No, you're good.
You good? All right. We all set? Good. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 17th, 2019 meeting of the North Andover School Committee. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Okay, our first order of business tonight is public comment. Anyone in the audience for public comment tonight? No, seeing none. Okay, our next order of business is recognition, which we don't have nothing on recognition. Consent agenda, accept donation from Atkinson PTO. Dr. Gilligan.
Yeah, I would just like to follow up from the meeting that we just had this discussion around Kittredge. That very generously, the PTO felt strongly about making a donation towards some Chromebooks, and I'm thrilled that it's come through the school committee appropriately, and Mike Grant as well, so that we always have equity, and we keep an eye on all of it. So
That's great. Could I get a motion from a member, please?
I'll move that we accept the donation from the Atkinson School PTO as presented in the packet.
Second.
Okay, any discussion from the members?
Just a quick discussion. I want to just make sure people understood that a Chrome cart actually has Chromebooks on it. So it's not a $7,000 cart.
Yes.
When I first read that, that's what I thought it was, and I thought that was a little bit of a gouge, so.
And each card is like 30.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is a donation of $7,318. So on behalf of the committee, I want to say thank you to the members of the Atkinson School PTO. We have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, 5-0.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add.
You could.
I'd really like to thank Colleen LeGros, the PTO. I think she's the president. She's always been on that board, but she really worked hard with Mike Grant to get this done, and we appreciate it.
That's great. Okay, next order of business is acceptance of minutes from October 3rd and October 6th, I believe. I want to take these individually. October 3rd.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to accept minutes from October 3rd, 2019 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, any changes to this? Does this look good from anyone? The only thing I'd just ask is that if the minutes could reflect, Bev, that I was late for this meeting, and that I appeared at 7:10 right before approval of minutes. I don't think it mentions it.
So that's the present part, doesn't say.
In the, oh, it does say it, yeah, it does say it.
But not in the body.
Not in the body, that's fine. That is fine enough, there's no amendment needed, so. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, the ayes have it. Those are accepted. October 3rd. October 6th was a special meeting on a Sunday. This had to do with NEAC's visit. Any, have a motion to accept these minutes, please?
I'll move that we accept the minutes as presented in the packet for October 6th.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Ms. Lynch, second by Mr. McDevitt. Any discussion? I know Ms. Mabley was not able to be present that day, but all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Ms. Mabley,
I'm fine.
you're fine voting for, okay. That's 5-0 as well, Ms. Zagari. Okay, highlight of the evening, student report. Jack, Amon, come on up. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Eamon, this is Jack. You guys know us. So starting right off with some athletic achievements. You guys, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, approved the cross-country team to go to Manhattanville, New York for a very prestigious invitational meet. And the boys took second place at that meet. The girls took fourth, so very strong performance all around. Additionally, the boys cross-country team finished 9-1 for the head of the MVC small school division, and girls did the exact same for cross country. The boys soccer team for the MVC clinched their title, and today I believe was the first time they've been scored on all season. So they've scored on once the entire season. Yeah, it's incredible. And additionally, unified basketball, which is a collaboration between special needs students and basketball players to allow special needs students to participate in a basketball league with players of their own skill level, began recently, and I don't know their exact record, but I know that it's a strong initiative at the school, and they've got many people involved. There's sports teams that go and cheer on during the games, and that's just something I thought I'd bring up because it's a really good initiative that we have going at our schools.
Outside of athletics, over the last few weeks at the high school, something big that happened, I think it was last Thursday, was the club fair. So all 50 plus clubs, or however many we have at the high school, there are a lot of them lined up on outside the auditorium with each side of the hallway had tables set up, and each club had flyers they were giving out and big posters and trying to recruit as many people as they could. So it was a really awesome event. It's great each year to see the amount of clubs that we have at the high school, and I think it's especially good for the freshmen who they have a month to settle into school and get used to being in high school, and then we kind of throw all the activities at them. But it was definitely a good event. I know for Spanish Club, which I helped to run, we ended up with a lot of new recruits in the freshman class from the club fair. And it was a really successful event that Mr. Nugent helped to organize. Also, for Hispanic Heritage Month, which is the month of October, which coincides with Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, Spanish Club organized we decorated, or not decorated, but we put up all the flags of Spanish-speaking countries and had students who identify with those countries sign their names, so we can see how many, or the people who are in our community who identify with being Hispanic. So that was something that started this month thanks to Miss Patry. She was really involved in helping us get that going, and we're really happy that we did that because it was great to see the pride that a lot of the students at the high school have in their heritage, and I think it's a good, appropriate way to celebrate the month of October, especially with Columbus Day, and especially with the transition now. I believe North Andover recognizes it as Indigenous Peoples Day, so it was definitely, as both, but it's definitely good to see that representation, especially in our school. Additionally, Race Amity Club will be leading a discussion either later in October or beginning of November with regards to Indigenous Peoples Day, Columbus Day, just to discuss the significance of that with regard to our school and also the wider community. Also, something else that has happened at the high school recently is the National Honor Society blood drive was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. It happened, I think, during 3 class periods, and students could sign up to either volunteer there or give blood.
Also, National Honor Society related, I mentioned this at our previous meeting. The school is beginning to do National Honor Society for foreign languages, so German, French, and Spanish-speaking students that are in the higher levels of the language are allowed to join if they are, students in good standing and have the required volunteer hours necessary. So what happened last night was there was a bit of organized chaos for the induction ceremony, but everyone who was supposed to be inducted was inducted, and now we begin our various service projects, getting people more involved with the language and with their respective language, and trying to branch out to the community and figure out ways that the foreign language departments can interact with younger students in order to get them more involved and cultivate more love for the learning of foreign languages.
Yeah, for Spanish National Honor Society, Miss Gravel is leading that, and she's talked about some really awesome volunteer opportunities that she wants to get going. One of the things she mentioned was we will go to daycares of with predominantly Spanish speakers that serve like Spanish speaking communities, and like read Spanish stories, children's books, and then also record them as like an audiobook version so they can use those again and again as they need to. So that's something that I'm really excited to participate in with the Spanish Honor Society, and hopefully that'll help with retention in some of the other languages too. Spanish usually has a lot of people who sign up to be in AP Spanish, but I know some of the other languages sometimes struggle with that, so hopefully this is going to be a good way to keep people involved in foreign languages at the high school. Additionally, transitioning to this week. So this week is Spirit Week at the high school, which is the week leading up to homecoming, with the week concluding with the homecoming football game and the homecoming dance, which is sponsored by the senior class. So this year, the themes of homecoming, each day there's like a dress up. So as many students in the student body participate, and it's like a competition between the grades to see who has the most people participate. So Tuesday was Pajama Day, Wednesday was America Day, today was Boston Day, and then tomorrow will be class colors, because so seniors will wear black, juniors red, sophomores white, and freshmen gray, and that's for the big spirit rally at the end of the day, where they have us participate in all sorts of like crazy games and activities and really get everyone riled up for the big game that will be at 4:00 tomorrow. Yeah.
Did you say the dance is right after?
Yeah, so the game will be at 4:00, should end probably around 6, and then the dance is set to start at 6:30. So the dance will go 6:30 to 9:30, and we have a neon theme this year for the dance, so that'll definitely be fun. But the 4:00 football game will also be fun. Yeah.
Before you move on, I think you had said last time that there was going to be some Spirit Week surprise. Did that already happen, or is it still?
Yeah, so there was a
You're gonna ruin it, Helen.
yeah.
He said Spirit Week
For
surprise.
those at home,
Yeah.
this could be a spoiler.
Yeah. The Spirit Week surprise that we mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago was student council set up a Spirit Week kickoff last Friday, where the pep band played their music above the, I don't even know what it's called. Yeah, the bridge. Yeah, the bridge. Above Main Street, and student council like threw confetti.
A lot of confetti.
Yeah, and we had to clean
The
it up
cleanup was terrible.
afterwards, and it was tough, but it was a good start to the week. But that was the surprise that we were referring to last week. But yeah, so Spirit Week will conclude tomorrow with the game and the dance, and we have extended ticket sales for the dance to tomorrow. So if any students haven't bought their ticket yet, they still have the chance to do so tomorrow for $10. And then also this weekend, senior photos at Drummond Park will be happening. So that's a tradition that's been going on for forever, really, in town, where the seniors will be heading to Drummond from 11:45 to 1. And there will be a professional photographer there taking like a big group picture. And then students also have the opportunity to like hang out on the playground, take pictures with their friends. And then a lot of those pictures also end up in the yearbook. So that's a tradition that we're all excited for and ready to participate in on Sunday.
Next week, there will be a guest speaker at the high school discussing career opportunities for women in STEM. And I know that's only for, I believe it's junior, senior girls, junior and senior girls at the high school who are interested in STEM opportunities, but that's a very interesting initiative at the school, getting more people involved and, get out of class a little bit too if you want. Lastly, we had mentioned vaping a couple weeks ago because there was the 4-month moratorium on sales in the state, and I believe that Juul announced today they will be no longer selling flavored pods in the United States, but based on what I've seen, if in the 2 weeks since the moratorium was announced, if that's not going to deter people from vaping, I don't know that the ban of the sale of flavored pods is also going to deter them. I think it's going to continue.
But yeah, otherwise that was all that we had for tonight. If there are any questions, we are happy to answer them.
Any
But
questions from the others? Any comments? That was great.
all right.
I like the thorough report, thank you. I like more than sports, that's good. I like sports, don't get me wrong, but, nice, thank you very much, both of you.
The Patriots are 6-0.
We might have to start collaborating and taking on the superintendent report. Great coverage.
Please consider world language instead of foreign language. As you said yourselves, you have a number of students at the high school who identify with flags of different countries. We have 35, 36 different languages spoken by students in North Andover. So their world language is not something that's over there. They're right here, and we're all part of the world.
Yeah, that's true. I think that on like the program of studies, it's referred to as the world language department too. So
Yeah,
that's our bad for.
But I think that's
Yeah.
a good idea to have going forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy the festivities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, next one is the superintendent's report. Dr. Gilliland.
Before I turn it over to Ms. Marks and Ms. Ando for the MCAS, and then Dr. Mealy for the enrollment update, just a couple things. Last Friday, we had Civics Day in 8th grade, Mr. McGravy's class at the North Andover Middle School. And there were 2 guest speakers that I think were involved in 3 classes apiece. In the morning, it was our new town manager, Melissa Murphy Rodriguez. And in the afternoon, it was the independent comptroller of the Commonwealth, Andrew Mailer. And what was really interesting is I was there for the town managers, and it was nice to be able to speak and talk to the kids when I visited. But when I went back at the end, Mr. McGravy said the fascinating thing was the driving question is, what is civics to you and how has it impacted your life? They had 2 totally different, stories. So I think he's got those taped, and I think we'll probably be able to get those up. So that was really exciting, and it was nice to see Andrew Mailer as well. And Mr. McGravy, as you know, is always enthusiastic is a good way to put it. Secondly, the unified basketball, it's been a couple years now, and I just want to say I was at the away game at Lawrence the other day, and it was spectacular. It was, buses, uniforms, official referees. The head of the English department, Rich Gorham, who lives in North Andover, was the announcer. And we had some fans from North Andover, but more importantly, typically the home team have their kids come. And Lawrence High had their cheerleaders there, and it must have been their volleyball team. I mean, it was awesome. The bad news is Lawrence went on about a 15-1 run late, and they won 46 to 27. But it was really awesome, and pretty excited about it. And then, last but not least, so our last school committee meeting prior to the NEASC was October 3rd. That seems like a while ago. Anyway, I just wanted to say congratulations to the high school, particularly staff, for putting together that self-study. I have to say that NEASC in a lot of communities, not to minimize the work, can seem overwhelming and time-consuming. And the folks at North Andover High School, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Nugent, Brooke Randall, and Scott Young, along with the chairs of the steering committee, Diane Frymuth, who's a history teacher, Miss Flanagan, who teaches math, and Amy O'Terry, who's the science department chair, were awesome. And at the end, they just have some brief comments, and it was really nice to be there on Wednesday to sit in with our team to listen to what Patrick Larkin had to say, who was the chair of the committee, and he wanted to commend us on what a positive school culture that we have at North Andover High School and practices that support that. He also talked a little bit about really terrific core values and mission, some really good things happening around instruction, and they do recommendations, and then they also give those accommodations, then they do general recommendations, which are beyond existing accomplishments. And they said we should continue our work in PD with EL. We don't have a huge population of EL students at North Andover High, but it's certainly one of those things that we are continuing to work on and will be in the strategic plan. And they said, it may be an opportunity to look at, in terms of funding, just some staffing, PD, materials, that type of thing. So they will probably get a draft done sometime in January, I think is what they said. And then it takes some time for refinement. And I think they were a little optimistic because I hear it doesn't turn around that fast. I think we may have something maybe as early as March. with the final report. So I'm looking forward to it. It will serve as a blueprint to make North Andover High even a better place than it is. And there'll be some really strong things and concrete recommendations, and it gives us a chance to review what those are in terms of curriculum scheduling, all the different components. So really proud of the high school staff, and particularly Mr. Jackson. So that was really it for that. And at this time, I wanted to turn it over to Ms. Marks, the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Miss Kristen Ando, our Humanities Coordinator, pre-K through 12. And as you may have seen in the paper, it was really exciting. You know, it's just one test, it's one snapshot in time, but it's how schools are judged somewhat in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, one of those components to it. And if you remember 2 years ago when the test first changed, I remember getting my daughter's MCAS scores from NAMS, and it said, celebrating, we're #1 in the nation, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, yet 51% of the students were not meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. They were in the partially in grades 3 through 8. And I'm not going to steal all their thunder because I probably already did a little bit with that. We did really well, and there's some new categories that they'll explain. And I guess I'll let you guys talk about the schools that I was really proud of. Thank you. Ms. Marks.
So before we even start though, I just wanted to give the public a reminder of some events that are happening in terms of the teaching and learning in the district, because by the time we meet again, these events will have occurred. So just a reminder, on October 28th, either from 9 to 10 in the morning, am I speaking loud enough? Or 7 to 8 in the evening, we have a K through 5 math models and strategies open for parents. We have Raising a Reader on November 5th, offering that at 9 a.m. in the morning and again at 7 p.m. So that is for our elementary schools, parents of guardians of elementary school children. ABEC has their STEM night at the 23rd or the 24th. You have to register for which night you want to come. That's from 6 to 7 p.m. And then Eamon also mentioned the Women in STEM Career Day is on October 22nd from 8 to 10 in the morning. So I know they have some speakers lined up. I know last time I spoke, I said if there's any women out there who are in STEM careers and interested, please contact this office. You can speak to Cara Larcombe or myself, and we'll get you set up. Also, I did talk last time about North Andover Reads. So we are part of that. We are hoping to get a lot of cards out to the military. So Cindy Perrin and I were working frantically on some trifolds. Will go up in each of the schools. There's one up in central office. The cards need to be collected, and I will deliver them to New Hampshire to the site by Halloween. But those will be in all of the schools, and we welcome teachers, parents, anyone who pops in, or anyone who pops into central office. So all of you are welcome before October 31st to send a card and pop it in the box. All right. So MCAS. So I just want to, again, welcome Kristen Ando here. Kristen and I, one of our favorite authors we talk about frequently is Malcolm Gladwell. I had the pleasure of hearing him speak a few weeks ago. He's fascinating to listen to. But we talk about the book Outliers, and I look at Kristen as my guru and expert in terms of MCAS information. And she talks about, in the book Outliers, you talk about the extensive number of hours of practice and training you need to understand something. Kristen laughs. She says, I have had those hours. I have not. So I am very, very pleased that Kristen is so knowledgeable and available and willing to help with all of this. So Kristen and I will do this, and then we will also support the principals when they come next month for their MCAS. So this is just a broad overview. So I think the first slide was already up, so it's just MCAS 2019. So last year we talked about the categorization of districts, and that has changed. So you have all the categories from meeting or exceeding targets all the way to broad comprehensive support. So North Andover Public Schools, again, falls in the category of making substantial progress toward targets, which means our cumulative criterion reference target percentage falls between 50 and 74. Okay, and we will talk about what that number is in a few minutes. So that's pretty good.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
On that? So when you hear of districts that are going into basically receivership, right?
Yeah.
So that is kind of that darker blue line and to
Correct.
the right. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
what I thought. I just didn't know.
So we're a good distance
if
from
the-
that.
For some reason, I was thinking on the old score, it really kind of included probably that limited or no progress, and I feel like that's kind of pushed a little bit more. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say the receivership, but there's only 3 places in the Commonwealth that are in
Right.
receivership. So, but some of those other levels, dark side to the real dark side, really much more state intervention and oversight.
Dark side wins in the end.
So just a quick review of our current accountability percentiles and a reminder of what accountability percentile is. That is the school's overall performance relative to other schools with similar assessments, and it involves 2 years of data, so this year and last year's data. So Atkinson falls at the 39th percentile, Franklin at the 77th, Kittredge at the 82nd, Sargent at the 77th, Thompson at the 54th, NAMS it's at the 63rd, and the high school at the 58th. So that's what those numbers would recognize. Sorry.
So I'm going to ask questions. So
Go ahead. You can ask.
Go slow, Jim. So does that mean for, let's say, Franklin, that they have outperformed 77%?
Of schools that are similar to them
similar
and have similar
schools.
assessments.
And when you say similar schools, based upon numbers, based upon demographics?
Numbers and
spring
demographics. Is
reviews?
there anything else that's in there?
Grades, most specifically, like that they serve, so there's like
1
high
through
schools,
5.
non-high schools.
Yeah.
So the Franklin wouldn't compete against NAMS in that ranking. Or
Okay.
the Franklin wouldn't compete against the high school in that ranking.
Right.
So other elementary schools that test grades 3, 4, and 5.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. So I think, Kristen, you were going to take this next
Sure.
group.
So the state thinks of us in 2 buckets. One is achievement, which are those percentiles you just saw. They don't calculate one for the entire town. Each school, it's like its own little community in its way. But they do, this is the progress toward targets. So there's achievement on one hand and growth on the other, and this is the growth measure. North Andover as a whole met 53% of their targets. The criterion reference targets, what they do is they weigh last year 40%, this year 60%, and come up with the 53. So we're going to look at, the state is going to look at schools as a snapshot over a course of 4 years, with the most recent year weighing the most. So a good year or a bad year doesn't destroy you or elevate you. It's sort of like this idea of schools are functioning places, there's lots of variables, and so they were going to be looking at schools over time. So whereas the North Andover met 43% of their targets in 2018, 60% in 2019, the substantial progress towards targets once it's weighted is 53%. This is the same cumulative number, again, with last year's weight at 40%, this year's weight at 60% for each of the schools individually. So North Andover would be everybody pooled together, and then you see the Atkinson, Franklin, Kittredge, Sargent, Thompson, NAMS, and North Andover High School, as far as what percentage of state set targets the school met.
So, I'm not going to pick on, I'm somewhat picking on Sargent here, but, so 2 years ago, if I remember correctly, they had a really substantial growth, right? And now they've probably maintained that? Is that why
No,
they're?
2 years ago, they didn't have
Was it
substantial,
2
I
or
wasn't here,
3?
but, right.
I feel like a couple years ago, they made a really significant growth
So
change.
it's a couple things. Sergeant may have had some growth under the old test.
Okay.
And what I would say is this, if you recall, and I think we may have discussed this publicly, Sergeant scores had dipped somewhat, and there was a big focus, and I think that what's really important to note, and I will steal your thunder if it's in here, I've looked it over, but I don't know what slide you cut out. Like, for example, Atkinson went from the 33rd percentile to the 39th. That is just remarkable in terms of percentile rank versus all the schools in the Commonwealth like that. And Sargent, for example, had those scores that had dipped and had been working on it. I think Ms. Leahy might have been when she first came in. And, you know, I'll let you guys speak to the exceeding expectations. But, you know, Sargent did really well.
No, they obviously did,
Yep.
but I was wondering if they're so high because they had significant growth a couple of years ago and have now maintained a little bit more.
I think it's actually harder. So in 2018, I have them at meeting 81% of their targets, and in 2019, I have them meeting 84% of their targets. The weighted average, not average, but the weight with the weights, it would be 83. So the targets are set based on where you are, but it's not necessarily easier to maintain a target, or if you have a lower score to begin with, to meet a target. What they do is they look at similar schools with similar demographics and other schools that have done well, like higher achieving schools who have made a lot of growth, and they set the targets based on that.
Okay. No, I mean, it's great. I was just curious if that was part of the reason they're above that 75 there.
I
Okay.
think the hardest thing is we
Sergeant.
just had so many years of the old test with the 40, 30, 20, and 10% for 4 years back, and a totally different scoring system. So this is only we're going into year 3, so this was year 2 of that
Right.
new MCAS 2.0.
Okay.
And Sargent is the only school in the district that met or exceeded their targets out of all of our schools, which is quite impressive, so.
This is the Atkinson, so their cumulative criterion reference target percentage is 59%. Atkinson met 59% of their targets, as opposed to the overall score of North Andover, which was 53. Franklin, 64% of targets were met, compared to this town average. Kittredge, 69% of targets. Now, this is weighted with last year's and this year's, compared to the town. Sargent at 83%. Thompson at 71%. NAMS at 43%, and the high school at 50%.
And just to point out, you see a little dip in the high school. The high school English and math tests were different this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So, all right, and just, we're always talking about our high needs population, so just looking at the difference. Last year is a district, you see in the blue, we had the progress for 2018. We went up in 2019, and the yellow just shows the space, the difference. But our high needs population, if you look at that, we made some substantial progress this year. If you look at the difference between the blue and the red, which is something that we've really been targeting. Kristen has gone out to the schools. We've been focusing on the lowest 25% in the school, so how we can bring those kids up to where they need to be. So I think we were very encouraged by this. And the principals have really actively sought out Kristen's support and advice in looking at that data, so I give them a lot of credit. And I think you've met with all of them this year already. So that's very positive. And the high needs, as we're talking about, our students on IEPs, our students who are English learners, and our students who are low income, categorized as low income.
So any student who's on an IEP,
They would fall in, they would
into
fall
this
into that, into that high needs bucket,
okay, I didn't know
yes.
if it was specific accommodations, for
Nope,
example,
any
in an
student.
IEP, just,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
all right.
All right. And then this is just a graph that shows our achievement and our growth, and we want everybody in that top right-hand quadrant. So you see that many of our schools are up there, and a few others are very close. So I think that we are moving in the right direction there. And then just in terms of high school changes, so as I mentioned, the math and the ELA tests were different last year for our 10th graders. So for the graduating class this year, the class of 2020, they have 2 options in order to be considered having successfully completed the requirements in the MCAS test. So they can earn a score of 240 or higher for both math or ELA, and in both math and English, or both math and ELA, yes. And option 2 would be a score between 220 and 238, as well as fulfilling the requirements of an educational proficiency plan. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And I know our high school is doing that because Steve Nugent and I had a conversation early on. There was a lot of this information was coming fast and furious when the MCAS scores came out. So really determining what that score, what that point was, that students needed to have that EPP and receive some of that extra support. So we were focused mostly on math in that conversation, but I know that they are doing that at the high school, so we are on it. Yes. I don't. That I don't have, no. But I can find out. And then for classes 2021 and 2022, their first option, again, on the new version of the test, would be to score in ELA a 472 or higher, and in math a 486 or higher. And then, again, they would have a second option that would include the EPP, and those scores, again, are weighted differently, 455 to 471 for ELA and 469 to 485 for math. The science test has not changed yet. so that those scores would remain the 220.
Those are the tests that they take their sophomore year?
Yes.
Okay.
So those scores are vastly different. They're completely different tests, correct?
Yes, it's very,
So-
it is.
Like the top score or whatever for the class of 21 and 22 is a very different number than what's possible. It's not that they don't have to do twice as well as these guys.
No,
It's just
no.
a completely
It's a different test, and it's
Okay.
scored completely
All right.
differently.
We weren't
Yeah.
expecting kids to like.
No, no.
It's the exact shift in the sense of when we went from the traditional test to the 3 through 8 scoring 2 years ago. Now the high school's gone to that. And what you're seeing most, and to David's kind of question, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but in a lot of districts, you'd see high schools, maybe 88, 90% proficient or advanced, proficient or above. And like, we didn't want anyone in the public or school committee to be scared, because all the high schools who used to be like in that high range, it may have looked like they've dropped 20 or 23 or 22 points, but they're completely different, not even close to.
The test is really focusing on college readiness and 21st century skills. So what they really looked at was what kind of feedback they were getting from colleges and what kind of skills were required from our high school graduates to be successful as they moved on. And that is some of the changes that have been reflected in the testing. So.
That feels like a red flag to me because not every student is going to be going to college. So letting the
20
colleges say what kids need to do to graduate from high school.
College readiness and 21st century skills.
So that's
So work
so where was
skills.
the feedback for the 21st century skills? That was from workplaces?
Yep. So being being part of that work community. So it's
Thank you.
both. Yeah. All right. So just quickly, the educational proficiency plan, again, developed for students who did not meet or exceed the proficient level, and that includes a review of students' strengths and weaknesses based on MCAS and other assessment results. MCAS is one measure. We want to look at more than one measure when we're looking at how students are doing. Coursework grades and teacher input. And the courses a student will be required to take and successfully complete in grades 11 and 12, and then a description of the assessments the school will administer on a regular basis to determine whether the student is moving toward proficiency. So I know there's a math class that students will participate in, and all of this is part of the math class at the high school if they're struggling.
So, Ms. Marks, who designs the EPP? I mean, getting 240 or above, I mean, that's a hard, concrete goal, you gotta get that, but the EPP, like, who would set that up?
The school districts set them up individually, so the guidance
Does the state have to
department.
sign off on that?
Pardon me?
Does the state have to
No.
sign up on that?
No. And this is a word that's been used for a long time. The EPP was used with the former MCAS test. Both Marcy and I, working in an alternative school, I think most people know we worked together before. We had to do some EPPs for students way back when MCAS started. So it's a common term that has been used in the past too.
Yeah.
Now it's just part of the descriptors of typical, more part of the descriptors of typical coursework.
Right.
What the 12th graders will take anyways.
I'd be curious to know how many students are getting 240 or above. and other
I'll
ones
find
are-
out.
And one other question, Lynn, is so for the students who need EPPs, when does that kick into gear? Like, you starting to be planning right now? Or do you
Yes.
see the data in July and already kind of start thinking about which kids you have to
There's some
focus?
preliminary data out, and that's what I mentioned in my
Right.
conversation with Mr. Nugent. He was looking at one score for math, and then I had just received some information from the state. So I said, oh, no, it's a different score. And he said, oh, so it was actually good news because it was taking some students out of that.
Okay.
So I sent that information to him, and he got the kids that needed to be there set up. So it was
So
early,
by the end of October type of thing? they're already-
earlier. It was actually earlier.
great, okay.
Yeah.
And that's an individual plan for each student who needs to have
Yes.
the EPP. And
Yep.
do parents sign off on that?
No.
So it's strictly the school, is there communication with families about
I
that?
would assume so. I have not been a part of that piece of it at the high school, but I'm sure that they do communicate that because parents get the reports, so.
This feels like a tremendous burden. I mean, it seems like it would take a lot of people power, and I wonder if the state is putting money towards that so that we can have the people power behind it?
I don't know of any money.
Guys, I
I know.
just add this. I think that the high school test is gonna take some time to norm and figure out, and they took their best efforts to, have more park-like questions, if you recall park. And what I would say is, in the past, they've had different plans that had to be produced under the old test several years back. And as you know, one year they said that results might be out by July, they didn't come out until October and November. So occasionally, we can be getting information or say we're gonna get guidance on something in December and it comes in February, or, you know, it hasn't been uncommon with the MCAS.
And Helen, I'll just say that what they're asking for here is something that we as a curriculum team are asking our teachers to do anyway. Assessment does not have to be the big MCAS test or the big MAP test or the end of the trimester in high school assessment. It should be constantly happening in those classrooms. There should be formative assessment going on all the time, which gives you an immediate review of student strengths and weaknesses. So that's, I don't think it's really is, I know it can sound burdensome when you look at it like that, but it's something that we have been working on with our teachers, and many of our teachers are doing that all the time. So I don't think it's quite as troublesome as it may sound.
And to David's point, if we're looking at, a handful of students, that's one thing. If we're looking at, 200 students, that's
Right.
something else. So
Right.
I assume that we're not in that
Clarify too,
situation.
that it's not at all, because I think it makes it sound like some sort of remediation, and it's not remediation at all. It's just another measure to ensure that students are working on the standards. Correct, right?
So our last piece, if you want to go to the last slide, is just trends. So these are big trends. These are not trends. We're not talking about specific schools here. The principals will talk about what they see in terms of trends in their schools. But most schools have increased their progress toward meeting their targets, which you saw with those graphs. Overall, schools met their math targets for the aggregate. So that means everybody all together. That includes our high needs populations. Most schools had an increase in their lowest performing group. So as I mentioned before, that lowest 25% that we can now identify and pay attention to. Most schools improved their targets in chronic absenteeism. I don't know if you remember last year, that was a big thing that people kind of, looked at. So that has improved. Writing continues to be an area of growth across grades. And it's across the state as well, so it's not just in North Andover. And our Latinx population continues to be an area the district needs to support more effectively. So that is something that we're looking at. Was it last Friday? 2 Fridays ago. Kristen and I were set to go to a conference in Worcester. I needed to stay back here for other reasons. Kristen went, and the head of our high school ELA department went. They got some really interesting information, and we've already since met to talk about some coursework that we may look at and recommend for the high school. I know there is a parent of an elementary school student who I've met with who is also interested in supporting and concerned about helping our Latinx population. So we continue to look at that. I will say again, this is across the state. This isn't just in North Andover with the Latinx population, thus the conference where they talked about all of that statewide. So.
And for those interested, if you just want to know, the 2018 high school scores proficient or higher. In ELA, North Andover High School in 2018 was 96% proficient or higher. Math was 89% proficient or higher, and science was 90% proficient or higher. So that's kind of gives you a better sense of, that change and who might need an EPP, et cetera.
Thank you.
All right.
Can we go back really quick? Jim, about 4 slides to the bubble slide.
To the bubble slide?
Yeah.
To the bubble slide, yep. Can you just explain to me why, and maybe I'm just not getting something, but why is our middle and our high school really kind of hovering at that 50%? And why are we seeing our elementaries really blowing past that? I mean, I think it's great, but from the elementary side, but I'm a little cautious on the high school side.
I wish I had that answer.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
I'd like to say it's because we've been doing so much work on our elementary curriculum that it's starting to show. We've started to do work with the middle school and the high school. One of my goals when I was still humanities director was to get into the middle school with the ELA piece. I talked to Kristen about that, and I will say she has done a fabulous job working with those middle school teams. We had some really great PD just this Friday, working with middle school teams around ELA. Cara is in there doing some work around math and science. We've both been at the high school working with their ELA department, so we're moving in that direction with them as well. But the focus when we developed the curriculum positions was the elementary schools, because we had 5 elementary schools all doing something different. So
Right.
that has really been the focus for the last couple of years, and now we're moving up. And hopefully, you're going to see the fact that the elementary schools are looking strong, take those skills and move into the middle school and high school with those strong skills.
So one thing that I think would be helpful, and maybe we can look at this when the principals come, but really kind of where are we at a grade level, right?
Mhm.
Because we should really be able to see that, and the data should support that, right? So if we've been making the right progress, as we've kind of been putting the curriculum and the investment in the elementary schools, we should really see, you know, for moving to 5, moving to 6, you know, and I don't know where the line is, right? But maybe it's kind of in that 6 to 7 line where we kind of say like, and that's where there's a little dip, right? And we kind of know that's because of the focus and the attention. I don't want to say the attention, but concentration of effort. Is that a good way to say that?
Yeah, it's a good way.
In that, but I'd love to see that by graph, by grade, I should say, because to see at the 50%, you know, that's half our district.
Right, and what I would just caution is, if you recall back to growth, like the target is 51 across the Commonwealth. That's been the target for a long time of, like, yes, you've met that component. And I think in the old days, if you remember, when I used to do this presentation, it was probably a lot longer. Like, if you got above 60, it was like, let's celebrate. And the high school test will be interesting to see. I mean, just as a reminder, it was just a couple of years ago that the high school was, if you recall, 30, they had a 36 for their median SGP, growth percentile. So it's gonna be fun having the principals in, and interesting, because there's stories to tell within these stories. But I think the hardest thing is just the change. Like, no one could call up a house and say, you know, I'm calling with a level 1 this, or with a level 2 this. Those levels are gone. So all the leveling that they used to do, and that's kind of how schools were known, and you finally get used to a system. It's pretty cool that we are, in all schools, substantially meeting the target. And the 2 differences of the sergeant is meeting or exceeding, and the middle school is moderate. That being said, the stories within the middle school that are going to be really interesting about some of the big growth they've made in particular areas.
Well, I mean, if you look at the middle school, I mean, we've had some pretty good changes in terms of science. You know, there's been math changes that have been there. There's leadership changes that have been there. So, I mean, all of that, but, you know, to see them kind of really at the 50%, I mean, that's something I'd like to dive into more when the principals are here.
Absolutely. I don't have the middle school in front of me, but the high school went from meeting 40% of their targets in 2018 to 57% of their targets in 2019. So we're moving forward, and the middle school doubled. I believe, I don't know off the top of my head, but I believe the number went from 24% of targets to 48% of targets. Okay. And so we're clearly moving in the right direction. I've met with both George and Chet and their department heads about, like, we're really lucky with this data, and that you can get data like as low as the item level, like per item per child. And so we can really like zero in on which areas we really have to focus on and which kids specifically. So I've been working with all the teams of teachers. And, you know what I mean, we can, you know, it's amazing data, but we can look at by gender, we can look at by socioeconomic group, we can really, we have the power to really focus in on which kids are struggling in what areas. And so, although they're not, you know, may not be where we exactly want them to be yet, they've made tremendous growth from 2018. And so we'll just continue to push forward in those areas.
So, Jim, could you humor me and just go back 2 more slides to that one right there, the blue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be helpful, I think, when the principals come, because that number that you just said, which I think was for the high school, you said 57% and 40. Was I right on that?
Possibly, let's look.
Or 58, 40,
Mm-hmm.
58. It'd be helpful to see that number in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then I'm not thinking it's, you know, 49, 51,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's where that's substantial growth, but that's something we should see, and we should actually celebrate, right? If
Absolutely.
we went up 18 points, that's really significant, and to only be at 50%, right? I get that I don't want to say only at 50%, but, you know, you have to count that 40%, even though we're counting it ironically at 40% as well.
Absolutely, yes,
You know,
yes.
but it's the right direction. We're not stuck
No,
at
we're not stuck.
47, 53,
Mhm.
right? So,
Right.
okay.
So the 53 is the weighted. Last year's weighted 40%, this year's weighted
Right.
60%, but there was tremendous growth in that
And
between
that's,
those two
that's
numbers.
important for us to see, and I think that's important for the principals to present, and I think that's important for the public to see too. Okay,
I agree.
thank you.
Sure.
And I would just say one last clarifying thing, because I know another local district people struggled with. When they say the lowest 25% in a school, that doesn't mean it's the lowest 25% in the Commonwealth. It's the quarter of the school that is actually performing at the lowest.
And that has been there for the last 2 years, right?
2 years worth of data.
We made great growth in those groups. We were able to identify those kids really and focus on implementing some things to support. And across the schools, our lowest 25% groups did really well.
Sure. Thank you, Krista. Sure.
And so the high school, the principals are coming on the 14th of November, right, Dr. Gilligan, is that correct?
They are, and I know that on the 7th, you want to.
We'll talk about it. Okay, so we're good on that. Any further questions on MCAS? No? Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, your enrollment update, Dr. Gilligan?
That's going to be Dr. Mealy.
Dr. Mealy.
Okay, enrollment. So these are the October 1 numbers that have been presented. They've not yet been certified, but they do not usually change. If they do, it would only be a student or two. And so what you see here is accurate. And just as a reminder, what the model does is take the 5-year average change from one grade to the next. So for example, if we had 330 students in first grade last year, over the previous 5 years, the average change might have been 10 students. So we would project that 330 was going to become 340 in second grade. And we do that for every grade. And it's a rolling 5-year average, so it changes every year.
Column P.
What's that?
Column P.
P.
B, oh, P.
P.
P, the change, well, that's
The
the
change.
change overall.
So
is
so
P.
where's the change here? Oh, is it?
So see this row up
Oh,
here?
there, that row, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So that's reflecting the change from K to 1. The average change over 5 years from kindergarten to first grade was 11. From 1 to 2, 7, and from 2 to 3, 6, and so on.
See, and that makes sense, because a lot of people do kindergarten elsewhere, then come into first grade, and
You
then a
would
lot of people go to
anticipate, so you
prep
would
school.
anticipate kindergarten to first grade, you might anticipate 5 to 6, and you might anticipate 8 to 9.
Right.
As the biggest differences.
Yep.
And so this just shows last year's data and this year's projections and how accurate we were, or inaccurate, depending on your perspective. I keep, not that it's completely fair, I keep self-assessment of the model. We can see how well we did in direct numbers, and also look at what NESDEC had projected. NESDEC projected like 6 or 7 years ago, and this is the end of the data. I think this is the last year that we had available from that study they had done. So that's the last time you'll see them. But we were off by 22 students, which is not bad at all. And you can see it's interesting. Some of them, there's no rhyme or reason. If you look at, for instance, second to third grade, we dropped 20 students. And then fourth to fifth grade, we picked up 17. So you can see the fluctuations with no rhyme or reason. And they usually offset each other, which those two did in that case. And the others are 10 or less in fluctuation. So overall, last year we went down 44, and this year we went down another 34. Overall, since 2011-12, you can see we've picked up a total of 61 students. So we've been really steady in our enrollment numbers. over that period of time. The other one I like to show is this chart here.
This is the one I like.
Yeah.
That's what I like too.
So there's a lot you can do with this one too, and I was having fun earlier today, but basically what I've done is the color code follows a group of students
Right.
from one year to the next. So, and you can see how started out, and this was as Ms. Mabley was talking about the kindergarten, started out 33, 33, and this was when it was half-day kindergarten. So more students went somewhere else than do now. And so it went to 391 in first grade, but then 369 in second, stayed there, but then 379 in fifth. And by the end, by the time that class graduated, it was 312. So it had gone from 391 first graders to 312 graduates. And that's not reflective of what happens, because here 334 was 335. And 304 actually went up to 339. So that doesn't, it's not consistent that whatever you have in first grade, you know what you're going to have graduate.
Dr. Mealy, what was the first year of free kindergarten?
I think it was 2012, wasn't it?
No.
13.
13.
That's when.
Because we both just missed
My
it.
kid
Well,
was.
just missed it.
Okay.
Oh, I just missed it too. I should have known.
Yeah.
It was the
Only Mr.
351
Tracy
number.
benefited.
So yeah, in looking at this, if you were going to guess which year it was, you would probably guess the 13, 14, because we had the low 300s, and all of a sudden we had 351 because it was full day kindergarten.
Yep.
And then you can see from looking at kindergarten the fluctuations from one year to the next. We've been as high as 351. Last year was 343, but the year before that was 308, and this year is 323. I do also show on this chart the number of births that occurred in a given year. Not that that's indicative of how many students we're going to have in a grade, but it can show some trends. And so overall, the other thing I was doing earlier today was looking at the average grade, the average class size. So back in 93, 94, the average class size was 265 students, and now we're at 357. But like I said, since, I'd say, 2004 or 5, that's been really consistent.
A good number to put up there, Jim, would also be to see what just North Andover's population is over the course of that year.
Mhm.
I'd be curious to that.
Yep.
Because those numbers are pretty stable in the last 10 years or so, but obviously over the last, 30 years.
Right. Another interesting look at is when the data that I started with, you can see from like 5th grade on, there were some low class numbers. Then it jumped up to that about 350 to 360 students per grade.
Are you 93 or 94?
91.
91.
Those are the long.
I think it would be fair to say that we're probably, Jim, I'd say in like 1990, met probably right around 20,000 residents or so, maybe just a little over.
Yeah.
And I'd
Now
say
we're about
now we're
30.
close to 30.
We're at right around
Right at
30.
31.
Mhm.
Wow. So one of those years we had 356 kids in 8th grade and 259 in 9th grade.
A lot of
What
kids.
was going on there?
A lot of kids
What
in
year?
Right there.
Yeah, I would
Well,
say.
that's a lot of kids in North Andover used to leave after middle school. I left after
But
middle school.
that's a tremendous number.
Yeah, I would say, I remember 9 superintendents ago, Dr. Harry Haratunian used to have a stat that he'd mention all the time that,
You're quoting Harry Heritage.
well,
It's on 8 superintendents here?
no, it was 9, I believe. He used to say that North Andover was unique in the sense that maybe 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 kids go to private school to begin with, and I think a lot of it had to do with St. Mike's and a lot of different things. I do know, when we opened the high school, like the high school population today is pretty much the same population that we had in 2005 or 6. It was right at 1365 or so. And let's see, Jim, does it have a total for the high school?
What are you looking for?
For
What year?
Like 2005 at the high school, 2006?
2005, 2006. 1366.
So, yeah, and what's our population today at the high school?
Much
So I think it's just
different
about the
than
same.
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And you gotta remember,
16.
what is
So
it?
50 students.
14, 16.
14, 16.
Yeah, 50
So 50
different.
students more.
Mhm.
But if you, what's interesting is like the graduating class was almost 400, or maybe right at 400. And this year senior class is what, 310, 312? Okay.
So the other interesting part of this is something we noticed was the loss of students between 8th and 9th grade used to be much greater. And then because when economic times were bad, 2008, 9, 10, students came back. But then when they got better, we didn't see them leaving like they had been previously.
What year
Good point,
was the
too.
new high school opened?
The new high school opened in February of '04.
4.
But what was interesting is, if you think about this, we cut almost $3 million in '05 or '06 from a one-year budget. And,
Yeah, we had kids in 2 study halls a day when the high school first opened.
And no PE, we heard all that, yeah.
So Jim, I don't know exactly the right way to mark it, but, I mean, it might be helpful to somehow have a note, because I feel like we ask this question all the time, but like, when did the high school open, right? We're gonna be
Mhm.
asking in a couple of years, when did Ann Bradstreet open,
When
right?
did kindergarten
When
start?
When did we start with free
Mhm.
full day, right? And I think we remember this because we've kind of, had kids who've gone through it, and you guys
Mhm.
were here as well. But you may just wanna put a box
Yeah.
around it, or, you can put a comment in the note, just so that we have a reference of this.
Yep.
So, no, I mean, we hope you're here a long time maintaining this
Right.
report.
Yeah, I can highlight the year and then have a note for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
Good
I would
idea.
just add that, one thing that comes up a lot is, building in the community. It's something we watch
Mhm.
closely. We look at if it's 40B, market rate. This is something Jim and I talk about frequently. And it's something we have to keep an eye on. Because overall, like, this is the October 1 enrollment. But there are some years where we have a lot of move-ins after October 1. But we also have some move-outs, and, when you look at that, some schools have a higher transient population than others.
So it's a good segue, because I said this last year too. We've been fortunate that for the last 10 years, it's been pretty steady, because we reached capacity, and if we had growth, we would have been hard pressed to accommodate it.
Right.
And so the newer developments haven't been projecting for a lot of students, but they're coming. There are reasons that we've talked about that we will be getting some growth. And that's why the projects that are going to be part of Phase 2 are going to be so important, to build capacity before that starts to happen, and where it is available for when it does happen.
Yeah, well said.
All right, any questions?
Very
Oh,
good.
that's
I
good.
always like this stuff.
Love it, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mealy. Anything else on the superintendent's report?
Nope, that is it for the superintendent.
That is it. Okay, quickly, a few comments on my chair's report. Also, just want to thank the school committee for attending our meeting on Sunday, 10/6 with the NEASC. I really enjoyed the conversation with those folks, and I do appreciate people taking the time out of their Sundays to go to that. So thank you very much. Reminder, on Wednesday, October 30th at 6:30, we're going to have our professional teacher status folks there, as well as our Hall of Fame inductees. And that's at the Stevens Library, again on October 30th at 6:30. Our next meeting is going to be on November 7th, and we have invited the legislative delegation to come and talk to us specifically about the new education bill. The Senate passed it a couple weeks ago. The House is going to take it up next Wednesday, so I don't know if it's going to be, I doubt it'll be finalized by November 7th, but I think we'll have a good context of what we can expect, especially for, a Chapter 70 number. Sounds like kind of the things they're fighting about are more about accountability standards and things like that, so.
Mr. Chair, I will be out of town for that.
On November 7th? Okay, I'm sure there'll be a tape of it. There'll be a tape of it, right? Okay, it looks like we're gonna try to do our first road show on December 5th. I think we're gonna be at the Kittredge Schools I'm sorry. The 19th,
Yeah.
strike that, the 19th then,
Yep.
okay. So that'd be on December 19th. We're gonna try to do the Kittredge School that day, and then we'll do another one in the fall. In the spring, sorry about that. And the only thing is that I think at maybe our next meeting we'll get a list of potential dates for the springtime. We do kind of do that right around November, so expect that. And that's about all I have right now. Okay, so old business, second reading approval of the FY20 superintendent and school committee goals. We worked on this last time. I didn't receive any feedback, so I'm assuming they're okay, but I'll open up for any discussion, if there's any at all. I know we discussed them pretty extensively last time. No? If that's okay, do you have anything to add, Dr. Gilling, on that? No?
I would just say.
I probably shouldn't ask that question, should I?
Yeah, you have. It's a really good one. I think just two things about it. One is, traditionally, I would have more traditional new superintendent induction program goals. But I thought, working with my coach, it might be appropriate, having been in the system, to really branch out and do some other things. Just because they're not part of the goals doesn't mean it won't be part of our strategic plan moving forward that we'll be bringing in November, revised. So I'm pretty excited about it, and I really like that we have shared goals on a couple of them, particularly around the decreasing class size, not only at elementary but the middle school. And I've been working really closely with Melissa Murphy-Rodriguez, the town manager, and Dr. Mealy, talking about, ways we're gonna look at that. I'm pretty excited about something Jim's gonna talk about in the, is it in the capital plan? The facilities master plan too?
It's part of the capital plan.
Facilities master plan too? The middle school?
We're not gonna step
Okay.
step on his coattails.
Great, I'll let you do that, but pretty excited to do that and moving forward, so.
Okay, could I have a motion to accept the FY20 superintendent and school committee goals as presented in the packet?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. McDevitt, second by Ms. Lynch. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. No one has no. That's 5-0. Second reading approval of proposed revisions to Educator Hall of Fame criteria and selection. This is Ms. Mabley and Ms. Picard, is that correct? Anything further on this?
So we talked a lot about this last time. I didn't know if there was any other, or any reason people are not comfortable with adjusting. And again, just a reminder, this was to make it so that hopefully we can increase our candidates that are brought forward.
Right. Right. There's something coming.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Wait for it.
Nope.
No, nothing? Really?
Nope.
Okay. Well, hearing none, then I'll accept a motion to approve the proposed revisions as presented in the packet.
So moved.
So, I'll second that.
Moved by Ms. Lynch, second by Mr. McDevitt. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you for your work on that, Ms. Mabley, Ms. Picard. I appreciate that.
Our pleasure.
And now, FY20 budget stats report. Dr. Mealy?
Yeah, this is my least favorite budget status report, because it's in October, trying to project for the end of the year is always difficult. But we do it, this is usually the first one we do each year. And right now, it's projecting based on mainly, as I say in the background on the cover letter, we've had 2 students who, at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, have gone from in-district to out-of-district, and we've had 3 move-in students who we are immediately responsible for. And so that's about $325,000 in unanticipated expenses. And if you recall, we went to the $250,000 level on the stabilization fund last year, and the stipulation is that a 2-year period, the max is $400,000. So that only leaves us $150,000 for this coming year. That being the case, that will leave us an anticipated budget gap of about $175,000 that we'll have to work during the year to try to compensate for. So that's where it is right now.
Okay.
When we look at there's obviously a lot of startup costs, right? Just supplies, materials, all of that stuff. We get hit heavy with that. Salary is pretty level as we go through.
At the schools, yes, for salaries, you're absolutely right. More so at the district level, we've been here for July 1, so you'd anticipate that being higher
Right,
than the
right.
school level.
Yep.
Mhm.
In the past, we've had to do things like freeze accounts at the school level. I mean, I know we're still early. Are we
We're
thinking?
not yet, no. And at this time of the year, we're still, Gilly walked in on us today, still reviewing the staffing tables and, who's the column increases and the step increases that have occurred, and putting money in increasing line items here and decreasing them there to match what's the actual staffing.
Okay.
So that, once we finish that, that'll give us a better idea if we have to do anything.
I'm trying to remember from the contract, can teachers move mid-year?
In
They-
columns, they
In
can.
columns, they can.
Correct.
Is it only 2 times
It's
a year?
4 times now.
4 times.
It used to be any time, and
That's right.
we narrowed it
did
down to 4.
Okay, I was thinking it was 2. Okay. All right.
Any other questions for Dr. Mealy? Okay, thank you, Jim. First reading of the capital improvement plan. That's Dr. Mealy as well.
Oh, here we go. Okay, so the FY21 CIP submittal, as recommended by the superintendent, this is after discussions with the town manager as well. And so, looking at it, I met with Steve Foster, he's our facilities manager, and talked about things that the shared facilities will take care of regarding capital needs, and things that the school department needs to request. And so what we've decided on is the exterior needs will be submitted by the school department, and systems needs like HVAC, roofing, anything like that will be submitted by the facilities. So when those happen, we'll list them, but for the most part, Steve, if you recall, the outgoing town manager last year increased his line item by $150,000 for those kind of needs. So those get taken care of there. So you don't see a lot on our request list. You recall the $50,000, which is being bid out now for the consultant for facilities master plan phase 2. That RFQ either just went out or is about to go out. And the district-wide paving, you'll notice, is a change. We noticed from this past year when we did about half of the high school, that the costs were more than we had anticipated from the analysis we had done a few years ago to put this plan together. So we've talked to the town manager, and she was okay with us asking to increase that by $50,000 per year and have that amount carry one more year than we had originally put in there. So FY24 was when we were anticipating going down to the level where we were just going to maintain at $50,000 a year. But that's another $200,000. And then the following year it would go down to $50,000. The drainage issues stay the same. The $50,000 a year starts this year, and then is all the outgoing years after that at $50,000. And we've added district-wide exterior maintenance / renovation, and that's for things like the Thompson Arch, which needs to come down. Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's structurally sound right now, but it's
I'm sorry, I didn't mean like that.
We're wandering in and out.
for anyone who's watching, it hasn't been determined that it needs to come down like tomorrow, but
Correct.
we're probably have to phase it out without spending a lot more money on it.
Right.
Can
We
we like a
would,
senior project, we run a sledgehammer
Yeah.
down there and they just whack it around?
not that one.
No, it doesn't work that way?
No. And the other thing, like, I'll drive up to Franklin, and I've told the principal over there, the Franklin Elementary School, that front just needs to be
Yeah.
better looking than it is. There's some work we could do there. So things like that. And then there's the note. I mean, IT stays the same. It's $200,000 a year because we're at that point now where that should maintain us for the next few years. But then not on here, but in the note, Atkinson, Franklin, and Kittredge renovations, the conversation we had with the town manager, she confirmed that those 3 elementary projects and the middle school project will be part of facilities master plan phase 2. And are included in the RFQ that either went out or is going out shortly.
And they manage that, right?
What's that?
They manage the RFQ, we don't manage that, do we?
Correct. I had input, I met with them, but they manage it, correct.
Okay.
And they'll be putting together the committee, asking the school committee for a representative,
Okay.
among others, as we did last time. So there was one other thing I wanted to say about the renovations. Oh, I already said it when we talked about enrollment projections, that they're important. They accomplish a few things. At the elementary level, the oldest 3 schools do need work. Franklin needs a gym. It's the only elementary school that doesn't really have a fair-sized gym. Franklin and Atkinson are both not sprinklered. The fire department is very excited that that would be included as part of the renovation. Kind of cleaning them up and modernizing them is necessary. But also removing the portables, which are well beyond their expected life at this point at both Atkinson and Franklin, and adding some additional classrooms so that we do have that capacity for when we need it.
So at one point when we talked about conceivably, and I guess this would come out in the master plan, but if Franklin were to get an additional gym structure that's there, that there's room where the current gym is.
For 2 classrooms, yes.
Is it 2? Okay.
Right.
In conjunction with the portable. So, I mean, like, they'll look at all
Mm-hmm.
those components. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty extensive. It brings them all up to current code as well.
Yep.
Within it, but they definitely included converting the current gym space into probably a couple classrooms.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because it's pretty disruptive for any school to go through, any form of construction projects that are out there. And so, I mean, if they have to do it, I just hope that we're looking at, I hate to say, 1 year of kind of that and not extending Franklin for, a couple of years to do that. I just think that that's not the best.
Right, we'll have to figure it out, definitely. It's
Yeah.
going to take a lot of planning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the superintendent is very much on board with that, and be
Okay.
thrilled to work that out.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Are you gonna start talking in the third person one now?
No, I don't.
Funny you should say that.
Well, I have one question, just because I get this question a lot, so I'm going to pass it forward, which is, where does something like improvement to the field next to the football stadium play into? So the Goose area where the JV field, people play, the baseball field, like, how does that get introduced is that considered a CIP project? Is that, how does
so
that get of interest to people?
Yeah. We did the infield this past year with
I saw
operating
that,
funds.
yes.
And the cost for the outfield, it doesn't quite reach the level of CIP. So we're going to have to talk about in the budget process because it needs to get done.
It's really, really bad.
Yeah.
Awful.
Would be part of the operating budget.
So,
I mean, I get asked that
All the
almost
time.
repeatedly.
Mhm.
All the time.
so
Yeah, same
elementary.
thing with,
Sorry.
the stage and
Mhm.
the curtain and.
Yep.
That as well, yeah, all that
Right.
kind of stuff. How does that, like,
Right.
where does that go?
Right.
And so one of the possibilities, as we work more with the new town manager, she has indicated that she's open to packing some of those together if they're similar. Like if there was another field that needed some work, you could put them together and then reach the threshold and have it included as part of the CIP.
Okay.
So we're going to
That's
continue those
very interesting.
conversations.
So-
Go ahead.
So I was trying to get worded. So we've been using CPA funds for the elementary school projects over the last several years. And I think, obviously I think Thompson.
playgrounds, you mean?
The playgrounds,
Mhm.
yeah. I know we can't use CPA funds for artificial turf, but are there other things we could use CPA funds at the NAMs, at the high school?
At the high school.
Like dugouts. I mean, I agree. I mean, I went down to see a couple baseball games this year with my son, and it's really disgusting, to say the least. But I know they would love turf, but I know that can't be used. Is there any thought to approach, because after we flush through all the elementary schools, which I think what we have left, just the Thompson School?
We still have Thompson, and we have,
That's it, I think.
it might be it.
I think Thompson's left.
I think you're right.
Still like, they have Applin, and they have like some other.
Some town.
We don't.
No, I'm talking about,
Right.
I think what the schools, I think, well, again, the last town manager, and actually, ultimately, it's up to the CPA committee, quite frankly, but is there a way to strategize about how to use some CPA funds? And maybe it's 50 grand, maybe it's 100 grand. I know that they need a lot more work down there, especially with the field, but I wonder if we can kind of pick off some small low-hanging fruit with CPA funds.
Yeah, we can check.
And I would just add, I think one of the things this year that's been a challenge is Grogan's Field has been one of our high school baseball
Right.
fields forever. And that was out of commission. And, I think the challenges with the field is they've done a lot of work on it over the years, but it is in somewhat of a low-lying area next to Kachikawick Brook. And, they continue to do work and, hopefully we can continue to pursue bringing that up to speed. I know the geese, we've tried a lot of things.
Have you tried border collies?
We haven't tried them, but I do know we had a stationary coyote, and they didn't fall for that after one day.
They never did.
And then we had a coyote that moved with the wind, and that lasted about a week, and then they were like right near the coyote, while it was spinning in the wind. But it's, we have to think about, how do we do that? And, hopefully we get the rec complex up and running too, so.
Sure. Okay, any other questions on the capital improvement plan for Dr. Mealy? Hearing none. Public comment? Seeing none. Anything from the members? Ms. McDevitt?
No, not tonight, I don't think.
Is lunch?
No.
Ms. Mably?
I am all set.
I have a couple of things. Is that bad?
We had momentum. That's right. Go ahead, I'm
last
teasing.
night,
Teasing. go ahead.
Mr. Jackson and I and some others, Mr. Limpert, were over at the Stevens Memorial Library. Were you there too?
I wasn't, but I heard.
Okay, so Mr. Brian Sheehy was there, and he presented on the project that he did last year that we heard a little bit about, and his trip to France. He showed us a picture of Albert Thompson's grave, but you had covered that extensively. He did research on Philip O'Connell. So if you are in Lawrence, the O'Connell South Common is where they had the trailers last year after the gas disaster. So he told us all about Philip O'Connell and his service, newspaperman in the valley, and then soldier, died at the age of 31. He was a medic, and he was adjacent to a building that a bomb was dropped on, and he ran in to help, and a second bomb was dropped, and he was killed. So it was a really exciting presentation, and Mr. Sheehy is, just terrific, and I know it's really influencing what he's doing with his classes, and they've got the history lab up with World War I until January, and then,
Some pieces were on exhibit last night, right?
yeah.
There were some glass cases, so they've been able to move some of the pieces from the history lab to the library for part of this. And next Tuesday, there's gonna be a veterans panel.
Yes.
So I will go to that one. And in fact, I just this evening got an email from Mr. LeBlanc from our Veterans Administration. He has 3 more veterans that are interested in participating. And one of our other high school teachers is gonna be there as well, with Brian, to help facilitate the
Yeah, so
panel
it's,
discussion.
I would encourage you all to go to these. I mean, they're really terrific. It was, there were probably, there were a handful of people there. It was exciting. It was exciting to listen. Also, Ms. Mabley and I went to the meet and greet with our new town manager. That was really great. I had a conversation as well with our deputy town manager, who's excited. Remember, she showed up and then Mr. Mailer was leaving almost immediately thereafter, so she's really excited to be able to dig in and do some of the work, and was talking about collaborations with the schools and others. So I think that's really great. And then finally, I did mention last time, but I'd really like for it to get out into the notes, and want to remind people that our Board of Health is looking at revising our statutes with regards to flavored cigarettes, mint, menthol, and wintergreen, as well as all vape products. And they will be having a public hearing on the 24th of October. I know that's been of interest to this committee. I know it's been of interest to the public that's come to this committee. So the 24th of October, if you'd like to make some public comments. And the Board of Health, those, their suggestions, their proposal that they have is available publicly online. That's all.
Nice update, Helen. Appreciate it. Anything else from the members? I accept a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Lynch, second by Mr. McDevitt. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.